Peter Noble, who's the Vice President of UNSW. Peter trained as a diagnostic radiographer in the United Kingdom, where he received the 1993 Institute of Health Service Management Award. He's held a number of prominent NHS managerial positions and was appointed director at the University of Leeds, establishing a new medical school with Bradford Teaching Hospitals. In 2009, Peter took on the role of Managing Director for Provider Services at North East Lincolnshire Care Trust, establishing 2 social enterprises for community services, and moved to Director of Operations for the MRC in the Gambia. Here he established the largest concentration of UK medical research in a developing country. In 2015, Peter joined the University of New South Wales, Sydney as Vice President, supporting Professor Ian Jacobs as President and Vice Chancellor. And I'd like to welcome him. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's fantastic to be here. It's great to be in Sydney, and it's great. What a fantastic programme we've got. I thought I would share with you sort of 3 reflections, really, and the first one, to my embarrassment, I'm probably the least qualified person in the room to talk about sustainability. And I started thinking last night about what is an expert and some of the definitions of experts. And some people would say it's someone that knows something more than you. So let me sort of start with that premise. So experts are about facts and they're about predictions. And as part of this reflection, I started looking through the books and the various literature. And it was quite staggering. I hadn't realised, in terms of the population increase, although it's all common to you, that this population, this global population, will grow from 6.9 billion to 9 billion by 2050. That's the prediction. And certainly, having worked in Africa for 3 years, with the average size of families of 6 or 7, and then spent some time in China, which is quite different, there's all sorts of moral dilemmas. But most of us in the room would say, in terms of sustainability, that very few of us would feel comfortable about staying the same, that inevitably practices will change. So it isn't really a question of whether businesses will radically transform over the next few decades. It's really about how and when. So if we create a system, I think most people would recognise that a firm's prosperity in the best interest of the planet is only possible, but not just possible, but inevitable. Now, most organisations are coming across all these dilemmas in terms of sustainability. Many organisations are flooring around at the moment, developing a hodgepodge of initiatives without any overarching vision. And that's not because they don't see sustainability, from my perspective, as a strategic issue. Is that it's really about their thinking. They're on an unprecedented journey, and there's no roadmap for them. They cannot see that snow on the mountain in the future. So none of us would disagree, really, over the next probably 10 years, environmental issues will increasingly encroach on businesses. And one colleague of mine, the one way he described 4 different categories. So the first category he mentioned to me about the losers on sustainability. So these are individuals, groups, organisations that look at sustainability in a very modest way in terms of cost and risk. We just mentioned Kodak. I think they would be a pretty good example in terms of the digital era. So those are the losers. There's then what they call the defenders. These are organisations that go slow, and that's okay, providing the go slow organisation doesn't get left behind by the competitors who are moving at a much increasing pace. So that's about the gap. And then certainly in my world, I come across what I would call dreamers, really. So these are visionary people who've got amazing vision, but don't necessarily have the execution. And probably the best example of that was the experiences in the London Stock Exchange when they went paperless and were fraught with all sorts of problems there. And then finally, we get to the winners. So these are high-value organisations, high-value business models, but they have a strong capacity as well as the vision for strategic execution. Now, one of the traumatic parts of my life is that I'm a season ticket holder at Manchester United, and it was a pretty stressful time watching Chelsea last night at the stadium. But what I've learned, certainly looking at the Premier League, are two or three things that they do. Not only do they have the vision, but they apply that seed funding, and they have that relentless execution. So what are we doing at UNSW? Myself, Ian Jacobs. Ian was appointed president 2nd of February. Unfortunately, he can't be here. In fact, he's in Rotterdam at the moment. As well as running a university, his research is coming to a pinnacle after 30 years, which many of you will have seen in the media. We work very closely with an individual who traumatically died about 4 weeks ago called Aidan Halligan. And Aidan always left a legacy. He always left us with these three messages. The first one is that you have to go where no one else has gone. The second is you have to say what's unacceptable. And thirdly, you have to say how it should be done. And it struck me very much in terms of the work that Vina's been doing. That's what she's been doing. She's gone where no one else has gone. She's said what's unacceptable. And she's shown how it can really be done in terms of the strong alliance between academia and industry. So in UNSW, we're developing a 10-year plan. In the first 3 months, we've entered into an engagement phase. Most of us thought we were totally mad. Ian's spending 3 or 4 hours in 51 schools. We've produced a green paper in 70 days. We had 1,500 web hits in the first hour of that green paper. And the focus, the mantra, is on really 3 overarching themes. The first is what you would expect from most universities, is around academic excellence. But what does that really mean? Our focus very much is to move into probably the top 25, top 50 universities in the world in the next 5 to 10 years. Our focus is very much around educational experience, the application of new technologies. I visited a small SME in Sydney yesterday. It was quite remarkable what they're doing in Malaysia. Some incredible innovation. But the second, perhaps a typical aspect of the strategy, is around global impact. Our focus is going to be increasingly in the developing world, our partnerships of international standing, and how we apply broad-based learning in terms of education. And then our third area is around social responsibility. We hadn't really recognised that although Australia is probably, in terms of GDP, one of the top 3 countries in the world, when we look, for instance, in terms of poverty, there is still a long way to go. So our focus is very much around equity. It's addressing the grand challenges, but it's also about knowledge transfer. And if you look at the OECD data across the world, Australia tends to sit in that bottom decile. But there's some fantastic work going on, both through initiatives like this with the ARC and through government, both state and federal. So UNSW hopes to be and will move in the direction of a major global university. We're actually in the top 5 of international recruitment, but our fields will spread much broader. In terms of education, our focus is very much how we engage around sustainability with students. We are establishing a small expert group, for instance, on climate change. We will be starting a series of public lectures. We're looking at staff competitions for innovations around sustainability. And whilst there's a stereotype discussion around disinvestment in fossil fuels, we think there are fundamentally 2 or 3 much broader questions. What does society going to do? Yes, what does the institution need to do? But all personally, what are we going to do as individuals? So it's fine talking about disinvestment, but if we continue to, or the travel that we do in our carbon footprint, we have to lead by example. So how does that all fit in today, really? A key part of the annual World Resource Forum around sustainability, we are delighted from the work that's been going on around sustainable material research. This is really about the academic excellence that Veena has brought and that leadership. UNSW is leading the global research effort in green manufacturing. We've got a fantastic array of speakers here today, and we're particularly excited about how the symposium will look at new research, industrial successes and manufacturing. There are a number of big questions. How will industries make a difference in the future? How do we pragmatically reduce the carbon emissions? How does the approach that we're doing here spread to all the businesses? How do we disseminate that knowledge? How do we change behaviour? For the first time here in the forum in Sydney, how do we deal with waste, which becomes a global problem? And do we really understand the economic problem, the economic value of many of our assets? So we are poised with a remarkable international audience here. These matters are very challenging. They're very global. And the answers must surely fit with the individuals, the know-how in this room. I want you to really enjoy the day, go with the flow, challenge the system, and have a great day. Thank you.